Urgently, Ukraine has played Budanov's deadly trump card. The Kremlin's worst nightmare has reached a new level. There is mourning and panic in Moscow. This decision has floored Russia. Budanov has stepped out of the shadows and prepared a deadly surprise that will destroy Putin's plans in the end. Heavy artillery has come into play. Operation Revenge for Kyiv. The armed forces have launched a large-scale retaliation operation. Moscow is in ashes. A strike directly on the nuclear missile carriers. Friendly drones are turning Russia into hell. A sensation. You have to see this. A nuclear fist for Ukraine? This was decided abruptly. Britain and France are giving the atomic bomb. NATO troops are crossing the border. Shoker is in a panic. The question of nuclear reinforcement for Ukraine is on the table. The political backstage has exploded. The final countdown has begun. Trump and Zelensky have announced the date. The war will end on July 4th. The Kremlin is in a deadly trap. The climax is near. What awaits Ukraine? All this and more in our upcoming report. Hotspot. Urgently, Budanov is getting his way. The Kremlin's main nightmare has gained new power. Panic has begun in Moscow. It happened. Behind closed doors, a real war has unfolded. Ukraine has thrown heavy artillery into the fight. What deadly trump card has Budanov saved for the finale against the Kremlin? Watch.
The former head of intelligence and new chief of the president's office, Kirilo Budanov, advocates for a swift peace agreement brokered by the United States. This is how Western publications are reporting on the progress of the negotiations. I
want to hope that we are indeed on the path to a decisive resolution of our war. We are moving forward. It can't be said that peace will definitely come tomorrow. If someone says that, it's definitely not true. But a lot of effort is being made. To be frank, we are moving forward. Cautious optimism is the term I would use to clearly explain the situation.
According to analysts, Budanov, as part of the Ukrainian delegation, has completely changed the course of the negotiations, since he possesses experience and information that none of the political representatives from the other sides have.
We need a just peace. That's absolutely right. We need security guarantees. We need a plan for Ukraine's recovery. But internal conflicts won't help. That's my answer to you. Any negotiation process generally prefers silence, but you will still see some of it anyway.
Well, let's put it this way. A more professional intelligence-style training, which of course is not mandatory in classical diplomacy, but in such undoubtedly complex, multi-layered negotiations as those with the Russian Federation and the United States of America, that's the skill. That perhaps was very much lacking in this negotiation process before.
It's all because he is respected not only by American and European partners, but even by representatives of Russia.
We have to understand that there are unpleasant people, and perhaps even countries. But turning a blind eye to this won't help. We have to deal with them. Unfortunately, we will have to do this.
Undoubtedly clear and distinct signals from the government of the United States of America, from various nations across Europe, and by the way, from the Russian Federation regarding their absolute readiness to engage in high-level discussions with Budanov, emphasizing that he is an exceptionally high-quality and highly effective negotiator, are being voiced immediately following his official appointment as the head of the president's office.
Meanwhile, propagandists, war correspondents, and other hangers-on of the Putin regime are falling into real hysteria, because they understand that with Budanov's arrival in his new position, there will be changes that will turn out to be truly tragic for them.
When it comes to the terrorist Budanov, yes, this person has been recognized as a terrorist and extremist.
In your opinion, a truly friendly atmosphere was impossible? Right now, we're asking exclusively for your subjective view.
At the negotiations? At that level, it's hard to imagine a genuinely friendly atmosphere, especially considering who was present there on the Ukrainian side.
Our delegation is led and represented by a very high-ranking and distinguished leader, representing a highly disciplined and very serious military organization. And sitting across from us is Budanov, a terrorist, a murderer, and a scoundrel who is personally responsible for the deaths of close friends of the person sitting on our side. And that's not all. Admiral Kostyukov, who is sitting on our side, is one of the targets of that scoundrel Budanov. And
And on the Ukrainian side in particular, we point this out every time, there is a terrorist recognized as such in our country, a Ukrainian citizen, Budanov, the former head of the main intelligence directorate. This is the person who told us that he would destroy Rusnya. That was one of his striking phrases. He promised to blow up the Crimean bridge, and he did blow up the Crimean bridge. So it's hard to imagine that the atmosphere would be friendly.
It seems Budanov intends not only to utterly defeat the Russians at the negotiating table, but also to make sure the same thing happens on the battlefield.
He needs to fundamentally reset, let's say, the overall public perception and image of the president's office, and create what has extensively been discussed for a very long time, the so-called military cabinet. If possible, even coordinating the cabinet of ministers of Ukraine to some extent, giving appropriate recommendations, sharing his experience, for example, on how to restructure the country's economy for a wartime footing.
It will be problematic to negotiate from a weak position. It's impossible. So please stay with us. Let's eliminate all these misunderstandings that exist between the countries, who have been helping us all this time. Let's pool our efforts, mobilize, and see this through to the end.
With Budanov's new appointment, Ukraine has gained not only a strong head of intelligence, but also a strong manager and negotiator who could become the main trump card in forcing Putin to make peace.
It happened. The armed forces of Ukraine launched Operation Revenge for Kyiv. Moscow is under massive attack. Friendly drones are bursting into the Russian capital, and at the same time, Tatarstan is in flames. Our drones destroyed a key station. The Kremlin is in shock. Where will the next explosion happen? Watch for the details.
Bright explosions in Tatarstan. Guests in the Russian capital. And an endless blackout in Belgorod. It seems the special military operation really is going according to plan. I wonder, is this what Putin wanted?
The thief should be in prison, but there are some nuances.
Explosions where no one expected them at all. 1,200 kilometers from the border with Ukraine, Tatarstan. One of Russia's key oil regions came under drone attack. We're talking about the Kalaikinskaya oil pumping station, one of the main hubs of Russia's pipeline system.
This is one of the key oil pumping stations on the territory of the Russian Federation, which carries out accordingly the pumping and sorting of oil products for further transportation through the Druzhba pipeline. In other words, this is a crucial component of the Druzhba pipeline.
Belgorod also has its own atmosphere, and apparently the locals don't quite like it.
It's simply dark in the city.
Moscow is a city where important decisions are made. A city that for years was assured to be out of reach. And now drones are appearing more and more often in the sky over the capital.
Moscow is paralyzed. The sky is closed. 100 Ukrainian armed forces drones have turned the capital of Mordor into a panic zone.
And while UAVs are fully establishing order in Russia, Ukraine continues to receive support from its allies. However, it's only in 2026 that Germany plans to deliver the Iris-T air defense missile system and the Skyranger 35 anti-aircraft system.
We can say that Germany is a key military technical partner of Ukraine's defense forces. It is worth noting the deliveries of air defense missile systems from Norway. These are air defense missile systems. The NOOSE air defense system, which is currently considered one of the most effective and advanced in the world.
But Ukraine is not only receiving weapons from its allies, it is expanding cooperation in weapons production. Recently, France announced the expansion of its partnership with Ukraine in the field of drone usage.
I also traveled to Kyiv to try to work with the Ministry of Defense in very innovative areas, for example on drones. I think we will return to this issue again. It is really necessary to build a full-fledged strategic partnership on drones in a very short time. This year,
Ukraine will receive about 10,000 strike drones. All of this is the product of joint Ukrainian-German production, and by the end of the year, it is planned to open 10 more similar joint ventures.
We are already buying everything we possibly can in terms of drones. We are already training our soldiers and will continue to improve our efforts every day to be better when it comes to drones, because this is part of the future, part of the warfare of the future, and in fact, it is already the present.
Ukraine is rapidly ramping up its own production of weapons and drones. One of the most notable achievements is the development of its own cruise missiles, Flamingo. But Kyiv is not standing still and is already opening up opportunities to export its own military products. Of course, first and foremost, meeting the needs of the armed forces of Ukraine. The main directions for such cooperation are the Baltic countries, Northern Europe, Germany, and the United Kingdom.
European countries and the United States are interested in expanding military technical cooperation with Ukraine, and the expansion of the sales market is quite remarkable. Ukrainian strike systems, first and foremost drones.
No one knows how much longer the war will last. Only one thing is clear. Putin's Russia will never achieve its goals. The Ukrainian armed forces will definitely drive the uninvited guests from their homeland.
Shock. A nuclear strike on Putin's plans. Britain and France are giving Ukraine the atomic bomb. NATO troops are entering Ukraine. Alarm number 1 in the Kremlin. Urgent. It's hard to believe, but it happened. The final countdown has begun. Has the West really gone all in? Watch.
A new attempt by the Russians to dodge negotiations. The Russian Security Council accused France and the United Kingdom of planning to transfer nuclear weapons to Ukraine.
Extremely alarming information was published today by the Foreign Intelligence Service, and there is no doubt that it is reliable. There is even an understanding, apparently, that in the future, the appearance of nuclear weapons in Ukraine was supposed to be presented as a Ukrainian domestic development, although, without a doubt, Ukrainians have no capability for such developments without external assistance. By definition.
the information from Russian intelligence appeared in a rather remarkable way after the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, stated that France and the United Kingdom are ready to send contingents to Ukraine. In
our understanding, up to 5,000 is one brigade. Britain and France, when we officially signed our declaration with all coalition participants who wished to join, we understood that all these countries were already prepared to provide a brigade each. And there are also signals from some other countries that are ready to strengthen Ukraine with their presence in the form of a contingent.
The first to speak about the possible deployment of troops to Ukraine was the president of France, who made this statement last year.
At the moment, we have 26 countries that have officially taken on this commitment to form support forces and deploy troops on land, at sea, or in the air as part of security guarantees for Ukraine. The very next day, after the ceasefire and the arrival of peace.
A few days ago, the UK's Minister of Defence confirmed that he wants to be the one to send British troops to Ukraine because that would mean the end of the war.
We will be ready to ensure peace in the long term. This requires us to invest and prepare our forces. Keir Starmer stated that he is ready to see British troops on Ukrainian territory, and I have already allocated millions of pounds sterling for preparations for a possible troop deployment.
But there is just one but. The Russians do not agree and most likely will never agree to such a clause in a peace treaty.
As for the potential deployment of various military contingents in Ukraine, this is actually one of the fundamental underlying reasons for the ongoing process of integrating Ukraine into the NATO alliance. Therefore, should any foreign military forces happen to appear in that location, particularly at this critical moment during ongoing hostilities, we proceed from the firm assumption that they will be entirely legitimate targets for immediate military destruction. And if any formal decisions are eventually reached regarding this matter, lead to peace, to a long-term peace, then I simply see no reason for them to be present on the territory of Ukraine. That's all.
But what difference does it make to Russia whether Ukraine becomes a full-fledged NATO member, or if it is a country on whose territory military centers of NATO member states are deployed? It's clear that Russia will never allow such a provision to appear in a peace treaty with Ukraine. If this peace treaty ever appears at all, I actually believe there won't be any treaty. A clause that would regulate the possibility of any foreign troops being present on Ukrainian territory, especially troops from an alliance whose members possess nuclear weapons. And
then it turns into a vicious circle. Russia will not agree to a treaty that includes foreign contingents in Ukraine, and Ukraine will not agree to peace without clear security guarantees.
I want to clarify this to avoid any misunderstandings. We are talking about security guarantees after a ceasefire. No, there is not a single European Union member state that believes we should intervene in the conflict right now. We are also ready to participate and provide our own security guarantees. But all of this is impossible without Russia's consent. And most likely, we are still far from that point. And
maybe European countries are ready to send their troops into Ukraine without Russia's consent. But Russia is being told clearly that these troops will be a legitimate target for the Russian army. I have no doubt about that either. If the leaders of the United Kingdom or France or other countries talking about the presence of their troops are ready to take the risk, then they can send their contingents in the same way today, without waiting for the end of hostilities. And if they are not ready to take that risk, then they must understand that even after the end of hostilities, their troops will not appear on Ukrainian territory. But this is actually the reality.
So nothing has really changed? The Europeans are ready to provide all necessary support while the Russians set absurd conditions for this support to stop, all the while inventing yet another batch of fake news.
The final report has begun. Trump has set a date for the end of the war. On July 4th, the world will be shaken. You urgently need to hear this. While the world holds its breath in anticipation, Volodymyr Zelensky made a loud statement. This turned all the cards on the table upside down. The final ultimatum? Under what conditions will the war end? Watch.
Ukraine is at the beginning of the end of the war. This is how President Volodymyr Zelensky described the situation on the 4th anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion. However, the timeline for this ending is rather vague. According to experts, everything that could be achieved without making fundamental concessions has already been achieved. In 4 years, the sides have made progress on humanitarian issues, prisoner and civilian exchanges, and direct negotiations have resumed. But the main thing is missing: the aggressor's desire to end the war.
The single remaining item on our agenda today is this complex political situation, which we simply cannot seem to make any significant progress on at this time. It's the issue of ending the war so that Russia, finally especially Putin, would give his delegation the mandate to discuss this issue. That's what it seems to me everyone is focused on right now.
At the same time, President Zelensky made it clear Ukraine is tired, but any kind of end to the war will not suit it. Especially since the beginning of the year, Ukrainian missiles have shown that Russia can also be hurt. So Kyiv will fight for a worthy end to the confrontation, not the capitulation being offered.
We want a strong, dignified and lasting peace, and before every round of negotiations I give our team very clear directives. These are always issued as classified decrees. But I certainly won't be revealing any state secrets if I say that my main message is not to nullify all these years, not to devalue all the struggle, courage, dignity, everything that Ukraine has gone through.
At the same time, the Russian side stated the day before that the Russian Federation has not yet achieved all its objectives in the war against Ukraine, and therefore the aggression continues. Putin's message was voiced by Dmitry Peskov.
We will keep fighting until either you tear our heads off or we tear off yours.
The United States, however, is much more optimistic. Bloomberg published a sensational article stating that the US expects to end the war by July 4th. A special representative of Trump also announced preparations for a trilateral meeting of the leaders of Kyiv, Washington and Moscow, which could take place as early as mid-March.
Why not now, but for example, in 3 weeks? Because I think that over the next 3 weeks, the Americans want to achieve results from their negotiations with Iran. And on the American side, it's the same negotiators, Witkoff and Kushner, who are conducting the talks. Not only with us, but also with Iran. And here, either there will be negotiations and concessions from Iran toward the US, or the Americans might even decide on a military operation against Iran, which is being widely discussed. And one way or another, this will affect the Kremlin.
At the same time, Moscow is not showing any signs of making concessions, at least not publicly. According to analysts, the bunker leader's arrogance is fueled by fake reports from economists about stability and false reports from his generals about successes on the front line.
As for the groups, across the central and eastern sectors of the battlefield, much like what is being observed along the full length of the active line of contact, the strategic initiative and operational momentum remain firmly and completely within the capable hands of our dedicated armed forces as they continue their progress.
However, alongside the public triumphalism in Russia, analysts note that officials are still not rushing to abandon the idea of a trilateral meeting of presidents. So, it is likely that this option is finally being taken seriously in Moscow as the beginning of constructive agreements to end the war.
The topic of a high-level meeting between the three leaders will indeed become the main issue in the near future. And most likely, the next round of negotiations will take place in Geneva. It seems that the main topic will be precisely the meeting of the three leaders. If Russia gives its consent, then in Geneva, they will begin to develop some compromise options that can be submitted for approval by the three leaders.
Moreover, Europe has also begun to actively participate in the negotiations. It is precisely on her shoulders that an important part of those very post-war security guarantees will rest. In fact, Ukraine's accession to the EU will also depend on her, and it is the final terms of peace that will determine the future fate of the entire continent.
The struggle is about what the way out of the war will look like, what the path to peace will be. And this is not just a question for Ukraine and Russia, and it's not even just a question for the European region and its security, but to a large extent, it's also about the foundations on which the return to those very rules, regulations, and the new world order will take place, which is now openly discussed in various countries.
Therefore, experts urge not to expect quick solutions. However, there is no doubt that the light at the end of the tunnel is already visible.